In 1927, studio head Louis B. Mayer had a dream to unite the 5 branches of the film industry: actors, directors, producers, technicians, and writers. His dream was to stop them all from unionizing so that he could continue to reap the rewards of their hard work and live the life he had become accustomed to. So he summoned 36 of the most prestigious names of the time to a banquet and explained his plans. And after collecting $100 from each of them, they formed the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I found that the best way to handle filmmakers was to hang medals all over them. If I got them cups and awards, they'd kill to produce what I wanted, old Louis B. said. And on November 10th, 1931, at Celadoro in the Biltmore Hotel, the 4th Academy Awards were held. And today, many, many years later, Moronic Logic is proud to present Golden Boy! Welcome to the 4th Academy Awards from 1931. Tonight's nominees for Golden Boy: Cimarron by Wesley Ruggles, East Lynne by Frank Lloyd, The Front Page by Louis Milestone, Skippy by Norman Torre, Traderhorn by W.S. Van Dyke, and City Lights by Charlie Chaplin. Welcome to the 4th Academy Awards and Golden Boy, Episode 4. The only show where the episode number is the number of the Academy Awards show that we're talking about. I'm your host, Kenny Cahoon. You might know me from Presenting Alfred Hitchcock here on YouTube and the Hitchcock Challenge podcast. Check us out at moroniclogic.com. The Hitchcock Show does deep dives into each of his films in chronological order. We do everything on this channel in chronological order. Along with my co-hosts Lance and Sam, we read up on these movies, cite our sources, break the minutia down into minutia, and break that down even further. This show, not so much. Each month on Golden Boy, I'm joined by a friend, family member, co-worker, railroad tramp, expert, or person I met at the airport. And we watch every movie nominated for Best Picture in the given year at the Academy Awards. We let you know which ones to skip, which ones to watch, and which one should have won the Golden Boy that year. Golden Boy stands for Oscars. They weren't calling them Oscars yet. Not yet. We'll let you know when they change the name over. I'd like to thank Jesse Goldstein, our executive producer, responsible for traveling all over the world to find copies of these movies for us to watch. I'd like to thank my Hitchcock cohorts, Sam and Lance. That show should have some news coming soon. So just stay tuned. You might hear something very soon about that. And I would like to thank this week's guest. I might know him from... Ooh, I wasn't expecting this so soon. I might know him from the Disciples of Sorat Writing Club that he asked me to join back in 2005. He's a writer, world traveler, ex-projectionist, musician. We drank absinthe together the first time that we met at either an Oscar party or a Halloween party. I'm not sure. The fog of time kind of obfuscates things a little bit, if I can use that word. I hope I can. He is also, well, you might know him as the co-host of the fantastic podcast, The Hitchcock Challenge, and Presenting Alfred Hitchcock right here on YouTube, co-founder of Moronic Logic. I'd like to welcome Lantz Hawthorne.
Thank you, Kenny. That was really amazing and heartwarming, and it warmed the cockles of my heart.
Oh,
many cockles.
The cockles, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, man. You look dapper as always. And I'm really excited to break down these interesting films with you.
Yeah, we got an interesting mix of films, I would say, and I don't mean that in a good way. I mean that in a fans of this show will have flashback to episode 2 because not a great selection. But before we started, I wanted to mention that I had to fly to visit you because you've recently moved to Virginia to basically to put your arm behind your back and be like, I need you to do Golden Boy. Because you were, at that time, you had grown a big beard because you were waiting for the next episode of the Hitchcock show to come out. And you wouldn't talk to me. You weren't taking calls. You weren't responding to letters. So I had to fly to you. And you've cleaned up a lot since I saw you. But I wanted to thank you for coming to this show after we went through all of that and showing me a good time in Virginia as well.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, Kenny, and thank you for clearing the cobwebs off of me. I had just sort of entered a state of, I don't know, sort of a fugue state where I wasn't moving, I wasn't eating or drinking. I had just sort of ossified, and you brought light back into my heart. So thank you for that. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be, part of the, well, I mean, I guess the president and CEO of the Virginia branch of the Moronic Logic global empire.
Yes. Have you noticed like people on the street treating you differently since the Hitchcock show?
Since you came, actually, because that kind of made me a somebody. It's like, it's like that's Ken Cahoon, and that's a guy with Ken Cahoon. So therefore, by extension, he's probably a pretty cool guy. So thanks for that too.
We kept getting people asking for our signatures. They were mostly on checks at restaurants and bars we were going to, but I wrote my name a lot.
I thought that was strange too, but it was very gratifying.
It was very gratifying to you. The Hitchcock show, just to update people, because I did promise a bit of an update. We are releasing episodes on the 15th of every month on podcast. So right now we're up to The Lodger. So this next month will be Downhill. The month after that will be, what came after Downhill? Hold on. Easy Virtue, then The Ring. So we're going to start new episodes. This is the plan, Lance. This is the plan. Lance is hearing this for the first time right here. Starting by December, we'll have new episodes rolling, and then ideally they'll be monthly. So that we'll get that show to where this show is, and it'll be a monthly show again.
Really? That monthly?
Monthly, yes. I'm speeding up the editing. I'm getting a little bit quicker with things. I mean, this show's always a day late. It's supposed to be the first. I think 2 episodes have come out on the second. But we'll get there, folks. Monthly. I have a head start. I have until December now to get The Ring, Farmer's Wife. We have, for people at home, we've also recorded, Lance, Sam, and I, we've recorded episodes all the way up through Juno and the Paycock, I think. Right?
Yeah, that was the last one we did.
Right. So people will see a much younger, vibrant versions of us in those. And then by L Street Calling, we'll be caught up and we'll be doing these things relatively closer to when we record them. Now that air has been cleared. So let's talk about the Oscars, the Academy Awards, the 4th Academy Awards from 1931. What do you know from your history books about this time period? What's going on in the early 30s?
Well, Kenny,
start us off.
A lot. The first thing that comes to mind, it was still Prohibition.
Yes.
And this was obviously the interwar years. The talking pictures are, as far as Hollywood, talking pictures are still in their, I guess, relative infancy. It's been about 4 years since The Jazz Singer. So they're still making, as we know, and as I'm sure we'll discuss later, the silent films are still being made. But sound is definitely the dominant medium now. Yeah, and that's the extent of my world knowledge.
All right, well, we're coming out of World War I. Not too many of these pictures really dealt with that, unlike some of these previous award shows. We're in the Great Depression now. We are
right. That's another one I definitely should have mentioned, and you definitely pick up on that
that's going to come up thematically in most of these movies. We're in the thick of it now, and I think World War II is still a little bit in the distance. So I also happen to notice that the Oscars website lists things that were going on at the time, as well as this book behind me, this Academy Awards book that I picked up doing a little extra research. And one of the things that book mentions is this is the first year that we're seeing. This is the first year of major Oscar snubs, where you would say there are movies that have been snubbed. And particularly one of the ones that we're going to be talking about is City Lights. The other one that this book mentions is Frankenstein, but I was looking at the dates on the Oscar website, and I don't even think that movie would have been eligible for this Oscars. Dracula would have been, but I watched Dracula recently, and I didn't like that movie. So we're talking City Lights instead. Charlie Chaplin's last silent movie. And as Lance, you just mentioned, like we're kind of at that tipping point where we're just moving completely into the talkies. But Chaplin wasn't the only one making silent films at this time. So was Murnau. Murnau has a movie nominated for cinematography for this Academy Awards, the fourth one, a movie called Taboo, which I think is because Murnau was killed in a car accident like a few months before this Academy Awards show. People in Hollywood really liked this guy. He was nominated at the first Academy Awards. And so that is technically, I think, the last silent film nominated for an award before we get up to, like, you can say The Artist. You know, people like to say The Artist from like 2000 something is a silent movie. And I agree, but that's like saying a punk song now is punk, because it's like, there's a difference between punk now and punk if you were making it during the punk era, right? I mean, if you're making a silent movie in the silent era, you have these limitations. It's totally different. Now you're referencing that, right? Does that sound
I
great?
totally agree. Oh yeah, The Artist is a homage to silent films. So it's definitely, it feels like the era, but
yeah, they do a great job capturing it. I liked that movie. We'll talk about it in like 9 years when we get to that Academy Awards. But I think Taboo is probably the last movie, and which I did recently watch, and I'll talk about when we talk about one of our other movies that's coming up on our list. But I think that's basically it for what we're really talking about in the news. So you watched all 5 of these movies, right, Lance?
I did.
Good.
I did indeed.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
You fulfilled your assignment on this. Well, one thing I'm going to challenge you at, this one is when we first started doing Hitchcock, you said you were the talkies guy. Like you were like, I prefer talkies. Now we're watching 5 movies.
Did I say that?
You did say that.
I was young and naive then, Kenny.
I know. Well, I think we all said we'd only seen like 3 silent movies at that point.
I've seen like 10 now.
Yeah. I've seen like 200 at this point. But so my challenge, I think what's interesting is, and what's interesting with the show is, so we're going to talk about 5 talkies, and then we've thrown City Lights into the mix because City Lights, the reasons for City Lights being snubbed, I think, because I'm cynical, I think that the Academy was trying to distance itself from the silent era, and they were trying to self-promote all of these bombastic sound pictures. And, you know, and maybe they had issues with Charlie Chaplin as well, and didn't want him involved. I'm not 100% sure on that part, but I do think they were distancing themselves from the silent era. All right, so we're going to start talking about these movies by the chronological order of when they came out, when they were released. So when we hit the one that is your worst one, you can tell us that's the worst one, okay? Like there's like, imagine there's a buzzer, and this one's not going to win the Golden Boy. So we'll rule it out because we only have these 5-6 movies to talk about.
That's true, but the competition is fierce for worst.
It is. But let us know, because I want to see if we match up on the worst one or how close we are.
Okay.
First movie we're talking about, Cimarron. Came out January 26, 1931, directed by Wesley Ruggles. I watched it through Amazon Prime for $2.99. Does that sound about right to you? Is that how you did it?
I did the same thing. Yep.
Okay. It's 124 minutes, stars Irene Dunne and Richard Dix as the Cravats. It was nominated for 7 awards: art direction, which it won; writing, adaptation, which it won; best picture, which it won. It was nominated for cinematography, actress Irene Dunne, actor Richard Dix, and for directing Wesley Ruggles. Cimarron is a 1931 pre-code epic Western film. It was a critical success at the time, but the high budget was no match for the Great Depression, and the film did not recoup its investment. Here's a quick synopsis, and then I'm going to ask you what you think about this movie, Lance, all right? Cimarron, covering the first 40 years of the fictional newspaper, the Oklahoma Wigwam, Cimarron follows the ups and downs of the Cravat family. Yancey Cravat is a natural leader, a man that is more comfortable striking out into the world than settling down. His wife, Sabra, begins the film at home with her parents on a plantation that employs slaves. Sabra has not traveled far from home, but agrees to relocate to Osage, a boomtown, with Yancey and their young son, Sim. Sim is named after Cimarron, a Cheyenne word meaning wild or free-spirited. With the Cravat family is Isaiah, a young slave boy that has snuck along to be with the family. Yancey establishes himself quickly in Osage, becoming a publisher, a preacher, and town lawman. He mentions early on that people need to do multiple jobs in this brave new city. Yancey uses the Oklahoma Wigwam to promote and argue for progressive issues. He proves himself an ally to the minorities of Osage, and particularly later on in the film, fights for the rights of Native Americans. Sabra holds on to her racist and bigoted views throughout much of the film, but after Yancey vanishes for like the 5th time, she slowly begins taking on his causes, running the newspaper well into her old age when she becomes the first female member of Congress from Oklahoma. She sees Yancey one final time as he dies in her arms after sacrificing himself to save workers from an explosion. What'd you think, Lance?
Reflecting from the 21st century, it's a very strange film. Like it's definitely an artifact of a different time. That's being charitable. I think the first. I'll just start with what I liked. I certainly thought the first scene where they had opened up the Oklahoma land rush, and they're all sprinting across the plains to stake a claim.
Oh yeah,
that was some pretty insane filmmaking, especially for the era. It's not something you would do now. It's not something you could ever see done now because it's just on such a grand scale without CGI. They would just use CGI. You know, the animals were frequently in precarious positions that they wouldn't put animals in now. Thankfully, you know, there didn't seem to be a lot of concern about either human or animal safety in that scene. So, you know, it's something you'll never see again. So it was kind of incredible. I also like the guy like driving the sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the bicycles that have the giant front wheels.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking it up.
It's not a unicycle. All right, while you're looking that up, the intro to this I really love because it's each of the characters, and it's kind of a Western movie trope. I think even the Young Guns movie do this, where they show each of the actors kind of in costume before with their names. Like it's over the opening credit scene, and I'm blanking on the movie I want to talk about, but there's a 1914 movie, The Bargain. That's what it's called, The Bargain, and it's a crap movie. I didn't really like it, but the intro shows all of the actors like in suits, so it'd be like the main guy in a suit, and then he'd bow down, and then when he came up, he was in his Western suit, like almost like to let the audiences know, like, hey, if you see him on the street, he's not really that bad guy you're going to watch in the movie. He's actually this really nice guy. And they do it for all the actors in that movie. So I noticed that these Westerns seem to have these interesting intros where like it's someone posed for the camera with the actor and then with their name. I mean, this one doesn't show him in street clothes, but either way, I think it's an interesting intro, and I did like that. But what was the name of this bicycle you were looking up?
Oh, it's a penny farthing is what it's called.
Penny farthing?
Penny farthing. Yeah, it's a strange name.
What does that mean? It sounds like a is that how much you spent on it? Like how much was that bike? It was a penny farthing.
Right. Maybe that's why. I don't know, but it was definitely an amusing bit of comic relief or a comic effect in that scene of the chaos of men and horses and wagons bolting across the plains to have, you know, a lone gentleman on a penny farthing bike. It's pretty funny. I don't know. I thought that first scene was pretty epic, and I thought it was amusing how the woman who played the prostitute Dixie.
Yeah,
I thought it was amusing how she, you know, kind of one-upped him to get a claim on the land, and his gentlemanly nature prevented him from, you know, just shooting her.
Yeah,
and taking.
You got to shoot my horse, and he's like, I guess I do.
Yeah, it's like, well, I guess I got to shoot a man shoots a lady's horse for her. So
Interesting character.
he is an interesting character, and he's sort of this mythological character throughout the movie. But the mythology is very strange. It's very, I don't know if you what your feelings are on this, but it was very much I felt it was very much white man's burden kind of vibe. There are several scenes where he is sort of a central character who is the shepherd and lord over the women, over the guy with the speech defect, who is his printer, the Jewish man who was I forget what you would call him when he was first in town. He was just kind
He's
of
like
selling bobs and
selling
bins.
like
those
fingers at football games, like those
Right,
selling
right.
those
It
from a
was
cart.
yeah, right. The 18th century, 19th century equivalent of that. And then of course you had the black kid Isaiah, which was the most unfortunate
Yeah,
stereotype. You know, he winds up getting killed like halfway through the movie, and
yeah,
that was merciful because that was a really awful stereotype. But I mean, they played it for laughs and for comedy, you know. But they also sort of play him as this father figure, this paternalistic figure, supportive of Native American, you know, rights, and so there's weird contradictions at the heart of this movie that are hard to get my mind around in the 21st century. I think they're sort of definitely a white savior
yeah.
thing. Where it's trying to be respectful to these cultures. So there is a weird progressivism there. It's sort of like shepherded by it's a progressive ideal shepherded by this white hero.
You're almost reading my notes word for word when I wrote down here.
But I couldn't
Like,
shut up. I'm sorry.
no, there's like this weird progressive vibe this movie has that's trying to be, it's 1931. I think these are all good ideals, like, kind of pushing for women's rights. Even although at the same time it's kind of not, because they're kind of presenting the women as in a little negative light. I think the situation with Isaiah is just horrible. I think, because some people are saying they're offended by the movie. I'm like, I'm not offended by racists in movies, because I think I'm offended by slavery and racism in general, that it happened. I don't think depicting it now is offensive. I think ignoring it is offensive to me. But you're right. There's this weird comic, like they're playing Isaiah up for jokes. And the kind of jokes that like a white slave owner would think were funny. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really offensive stereotype. Let's just call it for what it is. It's an offensive stereotype,
Yeah.
and the native characters, although there's some sort of like at the very end where Cimarron's wife, who was the daughter of the chief, gives this speech, and of course it's played by a white woman, but at least there's an attempt to give the Native American characters dignity,
Yeah.
and also to give the Jewish character dignity. The guy with the speech defect is played for laughs,
Yeah.
but he's also, again, there's a mocking, but there's also a gentleness that is just very strange. And there's the scene where he's holding Isaiah after he's been shot, and it's heartbreaking. I almost feel like the actors or the director or something was like, this this isn't working. We got to get rid of him. Can we just kill him off midway through the movie? I don't know if that's what happened, but that there is a pivotal scene that is right in the middle of the movie where he's holding the body of Isaiah, and he's of course racked with grief, and everyone's standing around him. There's the woman, the Jewish character. Is there a Native American in there as well? I can't remember.
She might be. I think Sim was hanging. Her name was Ruby Big L.
Yes, Ruby, right. So you have all these people around him, while he's again sort of this shepherd character, like almost Christ-like, with these other characters around him.
No, I agree with you completely on Isaiah. And I think that I'd written down like, so Yancey has all these opportunities to protect all these different people in the community. And when he's given an opportunity to do something for Isaiah, the only thing Isaiah asks of him in this movie is to go to church. That, like, looking back, he wants to come with him on the journey, but then he wants to go to church. And he shows up. They have this scene that is really offensive to me of him walking in Yancey's suit, and everyone's laughing at him in town because, oh, look at this slave boy wearing a white man's suit. And Yancey, instead of doing what his character throughout this movie, what to me he would do, which is allow him in the church with everyone else, he tricks him into going home by being like, we need you to guard the homestead. Like, but that's not really what he's doing it for. He's doing it because he doesn't want him in the church along with everybody else, which is a weird, questionable thing for a guy who's defending Native Americans, defending this Jewish character, helping his wife run this newspaper, and all these other progressive issues he's on. It's like, why does this movie take that route with that character? It just seems so incongruous.
I mean, there's a lot of I guess offensive stereotypes in this movie, but far and away anything having to do with the character of Isaiah is the worst. Like, really, it kind of tanks the whole movie for me.
It's a huge negative on this movie. I think it was also nominated for art direction, won for art direction. Do you notice anything artistic or in the editing that's interesting in this movie, technically, that even stands out in your memory?
There was some nice, I guess, blocking. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly. There was some interesting, scenes where the characters are all gathered together. That almost reminded me of a play. That scene where he's holding the body of Isaiah was I guess somewhat moving in a way, and of course the beginning scene where their land rush is happening, the land grab is insane and will probably never be repeated again.
What was that Tom Cruise movie? There was a Tom Cruise Nicole Kidman movie that they did the land grab, but it was like at the end of the film, or maybe towards the end. I think it was the movie they got together, like when they got married. Or no, that was maybe the racing movie. This might have been the one after. It was Days of Thunder. And then someone's going to have to jump in on the comments, or Kenny in the future editing. The movie I'm struggling to remember is the 1992 Ron Howard directed flick, Far and Away. Back to you, Kenny, from 3 days ago. But yeah, they're like playing from this time period, and they have this dream. She's rich, he's poor, and they're going to run away and grab some land and start a family together. But that came into my head because I was like, Cimarron, what a way to start a movie, though, with this exciting land grab scene, which normally you would think if you're going to spend money on that, that's like the end of the movie, right? The only other thing I wanted to mention on this movie that's of interest to film history is that the cinematographer, Edward Kroniger, they built this town, this Western town that they're in, and this was used multiple times. So it's the award-winning sets eventually formed the nucleus of RKO's expensive movie ranch in Encino, where other films were later shot. So this became like, you might see this Western town in other movies redecorated. Other than that, Cimarron, do you have anything else you want to say on this movie before we move on?
Let's move on.
Let us move on. So
the worst movies.
All right, our next movie, East Lynne, came out February 20th, 1931, directed by Frank Lloyd. Availability, I believe, Lance, you and I watched the same bootleg copy on YouTube, which had an additional bootleg 10 minutes tacked on at the end that were remarkably better looking than the early part of the movie. It was 102 minutes. It starred Anne Harding as Lady Isabella, Clive Brook as Captain William Levinson, Conrad Nagel as Robert Carlyle. East Lynne is a 1931 American pre-code film version of Ellen Wood's eponymous 1861 novel. Only one print of the film is known to exist, though bootleg DVD copies exist, minus the final scene. We saw that. This print is in good shape, although several frames have an X on them. I definitely saw that, indicating they were to be removed in the film editing stage. One frame has a crosshairs on it, while several frames have ink marks. People may view the film at the University of California, Los Angeles' Instructional Media Lab, Powell Library, after arranging an appointment. The film's copyright was renewed, so it won't fall into public domain until 2027, which probably means it'll be at least until then that somebody decides to put this out in a much better version. There were two previous versions of this movie, one in 1916 with Theda Bara. Our Hitchcock fans will recognize that name from one of the Hitchcock movies where we talked about the vamp era. And they did a 1925 version. All right, here's the synopsis. Wealthy socialite Lady Isabella marries Robert Carlyle, an uptight politician, and he moves her to his family homestead in rural East Lynne. Once there, Robert's miserable sister Cornelia exerts her influence on the household, running the estate and dictating rules for Isabella's young son William. Lady Isabella endures this until an old friend, Captain William Levinson, comes to visit. While there, Levinson behaves very poorly, and causes Cornelia to believe an affair has taken place, though none did. She convinces Robert, and Isabella ends up divorced on the street, losing custody of her son and yearning to return to East Lynne to be with him. Later, and after surviving a bombing in Paris, Isabella makes her way to William just in time to see him before going completely blind. She then walks off a cliff, and ex-husband Robert feels sad, maybe. The thing, this movie we should mention was only nominated for one award for Best Picture. Although the actress Anne Harding was nominated at this Academy Awards for actress for a different movie, for a movie called Holiday. So not for this one. I found the book synopsis of this movie, which is different, obviously, but there's a few things that are the same. And like one of the things that struck me the most was in the book, East Lynne is her estate. Her and her father own East Lynne. Her father dies and she marries Conrad Nagel's character, Robert Carlyle. He moves to East Lynne with his sister, and then his sister takes over the estate. It's not a huge change, but for me, it makes, like, because the whole movie, I'm like, why is named East Lynne? Why would she want to go back to it? Because she didn't want to go back until midway through when she loses her son, and then she wants her son back. So suddenly the movie's like, oh, okay, this is what the movie's about. She needs to get her son back from East Lynne. And I feel like it's more interesting, the plot line of her losing her home estate and then being cast out by the sister and then wanting to return home to something. Like, that feels thematically like a much better story than what we get in this movie, which the movie just...
Right. You know, now that I see it, I didn't know this, but now that you mention it, that was one of the things I found a little strange. So she decides to go with, so she meets Captain William Levison, who happens to show up while she's awaiting a ship back to America, I think. Mm-hmm. So she still has an estate and a life and, you know, friends and a life she could have back in the States in New York. So it struck me as a little strange. This makes more sense, and it adds a double layer of tragedy to it because she loses her son and she also loses her father's estate. And she's lost her father too. So that's like the level of tragedy. She still has a father throughout this whole movie, which I think kind of dampens the tragic aspects a little bit, because she does have options. I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking she can just go back to the States. You know, yes, she wants her child, but she decides instead to embark on this, European tour with Captain Levison.
Yeah.
Who that of course goes tragically awry because he turns out to be a creep and loses his job as an ambassador because he had, I guess, sold himself to the French or something. I don't remember exactly.
He does something nefarious.
He does something nefarious, and so now they're both disgraced and just sort of living this disgraced life in Paris. He's a man without a country. She's apparently a woman without a country. The father shows up. I'm thinking the father could easily just rescue her, but he doesn't. And there's this awkward scene at the end where they, embrace, and then he goes, okay, and then he puts his hat on and puts the brim down and walks out, and it's so strange. But there's a lot of, I think there's things that they did. One of the things I notice about these older movies too is there are some odd segues that I think would have been cut out that are never included in modern movies, where people would say something like, well, goodbye then, and then they turn around and leave, and you would just not do that in a movie these days. But anyway, it is interesting that you say that, because I thought it was the level of tragedy was blunted somewhat by this idea in the back of my mind that she had options, whereas if she loses her family estate and her father's dead, she has no options, and that's a much more tragic. And of course, it gets even more tragic. She discovers she has a rare disease. Is that what it is? Where she starts to go blind?
Well, no. In the book, I think in both it's an accident. In the movie, they're trapped in sea.
Oh, that's right. They're in the sea. Right. She's bombed. She's trapped in the rubble. I'm sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, right. So she was. That's right. The house that they were in was bombed. Her Captain Levison is killed, presumably
dead. Yeah.
And then she is injured and loses her vision starts to go. And so she has a timeline. She has a certain amount of time before her vision goes completely. So she decides she wants to go back to visit her son one last time and see him with her own eyes. So she has to go to East Lynne. But she's this fallen woman who has nothing in the world now, not even her sight. It's very maudlin.
I was thinking this reminds me a little bit of when we did Easy Virtue for the
I was
Hitchcock.
going to say that was very reminiscent of Easy Virtue.
Don't
Tragically fallen woman who is by no fault of her own, is cast out of society, meets a tragic end. Although this ending was way worse.
Oh yeah, well I
She,
mean
she's
she
blind and she
blindly
walks off a
wanders-
cliff.
Yeah. In a house that she lived at, you'd think she'd be aware of cliffs nearby.
Yeah, you would think. I don't know. Maybe that was a new cliff, Kenny. Maybe
Yeah, that just
maybe
formed, but after she went blind. Yeah, there was just so much. I just didn't know what I was rooting for to happen in this movie. I'm like, she's making a lot of bad choices. These guys are all kind of not good guys. You know, the husband's not a good guy. The new guy's not a good guy. Basically, the movie to me felt like Hollywood being like, if you're a young woman with new money, you shouldn't party a lot. You know, it's going to lead you to your ruin, because that's all she wanted to do, right? Was go to parties. Like when she left and when she's out with Levinson in France, they're just going to parties. He's like, I don't want to hang out anymore. And she's like, no, we're one more. This is why we're here. Yeah, I just didn't understand this movie at all. I didn't feel anything for it. I thought it was comical, her walking off a cliff at the end.
It was. It's supposed to be a tragedy, and I'm laughing.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a toughie.
This was probably the movie that I struggled to watch the most. The print was also, it was like a videotape of a print, like, I don't know, shot through a piece of plastic wrap with a phone, with another phone. So it was a really bad print. And except for the last 10 minutes that you pointed out, which looked pretty good, but it's shot on a phone from, I guess it must have been shot from inside UCLA theater. And it looks pretty good. It actually is, a really nice print. So
they must have the full print in that quality. It's how come someone there can't just release it? Like make a copy and release a digital copy. Why are we in 2023? Why do I have to fight to see this terrible movie? Just put it out there. What are we waiting for? You're not going to make money in 2027 when you're selling this thing.
Agreed.
The front page, April 4th, 1931, directed by Louis Milestone. This was pretty easy to find on YouTube. 101 minutes, starring actor Pat O'Brien as Hildebrandt Hildy Johnson and actor Adolph Menjou as his boss, Walter Burns. What was that?
Let me just interrupt you here. I just want to say that this is also on HBO Max. So if you subscribe to HBO Max, you can watch this.
Did you watch the HBO Max one?
I did. Yeah.
So you had subtitles.
I did, but I didn't put them on.
How do you?
I'm not a millennial. I don't do that.
Yeah, but they're talking so fast in this movie. How do you keep?
I know.
Up?
I should have. It didn't really occur to me. I just kind of kept rewinding or just ignoring.
All right. This was nominated for three awards. Actor Adolph Menjou, the boss. It was nominated for directing, Louis Milestone, and it was nominated for outstanding Best Picture. We should note that the director, Louis Milestone, won for his movie All Quiet on the Western Front at the last Academy Awards, and he's been nominated almost every Oscar so far. The front page is a 1931 American pre-code screwball comedy drama film directed by Louis Milestone. It was based on a play from 1928 of the same name. And here's the synopsis. Ace News reporter Hildebrandt Johnson plans to quit his job at the Morning Post to marry his sweetheart, Peggy Grant, and takes a job in advertising in the big city. But before he can go, he's roped into covering one more big story. Convicted murderer Earl Williams is about to go to the gallows for killing a black policeman when he dramatically escapes police custody. During a reenactment of the crime, he is handed a loaded gun and shoots his way free. As newspapermen swarm onto every detail of the story, elaborating, embellishing, and fabricating salacious details, Hildy learns Earl Williams might be innocent and hides him in a roll-top desk. Walter Burns, Hildy's boss and editor of the Morning Post, arrives to control the story, lying to police and kidnapping Hildy's mother-in-law when she witnesses Earl Williams in the desk. But the sheriff and mayor are also corrupt. A stay of execution sent by the governor is ignored because it will benefit them politically to execute Williams. In the end, the reprieve is granted. Hildy gets the story and turns down a big promotion, retiring from newspapers to go on his planned wedding trip. His boss wishes him well, gives Hildy his watch, then calls the police to report it as stolen when Hildy and his wife leave. lot going on here, and I don't even think I read that as fast as these guys were talking in the movie. You know, when you're a kid and you hear these, yeah, they ba 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 ba, you like your parents listening to these oldie times movies, and they're all talking like Jimmy Cagney or something, like super quick, like hey, step aside there. This movie must be where it all starts because it's hard to follow.
Yeah, the dialogue is hard to follow. Also we're watching it through a 90 some odd year old print. Well, maybe the print isn't 90 years old, but it's a movie from 90 years ago. There's going to be some degradation. So yeah, it's a little hard to follow exactly what they're saying. I found myself rewinding a lot, but I don't know it kind of felt like the most maybe modern and well produced movie of the ones that were nominated. I don't know if you've felt that, and maybe it was also a good print. Obviously, I'm watching it on HBO Max. They had about as good a print as you can get. Stylistically, it almost felt like it was reaching into the future a little bit.
This director Milestone, I think he just won Best Picture at the last Oscars for All Quiet on the Western Front. Everyone knows him at this point. That movie was celebrated all over the world. And then so for his next movie, there feels like a lot of inventiveness in this. He's moving the camera around a lot. So you got a newsroom. It's one static location where you've got all these news reporters, and they're all pitching various angles of various stories, and they're exaggerating things, and they're all talking against each other, and they're going to the phones. And he's moving the camera like around the room, so you're getting it, like you feel the madness that's going on there. Again, compared to some of these movies we just watched, Cimarron and East Lynne, like they're not thinking that way with the camera.
No, there's a lot of camera. Interesting. I don't know if you remember when we're first introduced to the Walter Burns character, and he's striding through the print room where they're printing the paper, and the camera, it's like a low tracking shot where the camera's low to sort of give him the impression of the big boss towering over everybody, and it's a tracking shot through the floor of the print shop following him. And I love that scene. And there was a lot of interesting camera work. There was one, I don't know if you remember this one, and I'm trying to remember what exactly was happening, but one of the characters gets off an elevator into like a mirrored room, and you just see him reflected in all these mirrors. For a movie that is based on a play, I can imagine it must have come across as very edgy at the time that it came out. It's based on obviously newspaper men, so they're going to be kind of hard bitten and cynical. Yeah. But it was almost like breathtakingly cynical, especially for the era, and especially I'm so used to kind of seeing in all of these movies something a bit softened around the edges, and this movie was not really softened. It was pretty intense and pretty edgy.
The sound too is something that the amount of people talking in all different places in the room, they had to mic all these guys, and we're at the beginning of sound. This is very hard. I think it doesn't always succeed in the movie, particularly when people are whispering. Like, there's a scene where he goes to jump on a phone and he's going to whisper some details, and like the first thing he says, like almost you can't hear it at all, and then he does the whispering talk, and it's almost like they're on the fly and they're like, we don't have time to redo this again, but he's also not sure as an actor, because you're not used to, how do I talk around this microphone? Like, how soft is too soft? How loud is too loud? And I feel like there's scenes in here for sure where an actor is trying to do a softer voice, but it's like too soft for the mic to pick it up correctly. So then you're like, shit, you kind of miss that. And then they'll either repeat it or just say something. You kind of just get context clues, figure out what's going on. But I do think it's inventive, like you just said, it's not like a play. Like so many of these movies, the complaint is like, you're filming a play. Why do that? We can just go see the play. This is like, you're actually using the medium. And I appreciate this movie.
We're definitely trying to. I wouldn't say I love this movie. I don't think it's a must watch or anything, but it was probably the most interesting. It was definitely, I felt like the most interesting of the sound ones. I mean, Cimarron was interesting because it's just so insane.
Yeah.
but I thought this was a fascinating movie. I thought the story was interesting. I really liked Walter Burns' character, the kind of guy devoid of scruples, newspaper editor. He was the most interesting character by far. I thought Christy Colleran, the lead character, was not terribly compelling, but it was fine. All the women, there's a lot of roughing up of women too, and just a lot of violence in general. I think through all these movies, there's kind of a surprising level of, I guess, just people just were rougher back then. A lot of a lot of manhandling and shoving and pushing and grabbing and punching and kicking, that like you wouldn't do these days. Like you wouldn't just put your hands on somebody like these guys do. So I don't know if that's how things were back then. If you're watching these movies, it certainly seems that way, but
I think so. I think assault was just not a bad thing back then. They just you were expected
it's just what you did.
left your house.
Right. It's what you did. It's
Yeah.
to get respect. If you had to grab somebody by the arm and shake them, if you had to grab a woman and slap her a little bit, that's just what had to be done in those days, I guess.
The times. I would say my one criticism of this movie or my main criticism of this movie is, I'm a person I've described in these other episodes. I like directors. I'm like into the auteur director. If you said, oh, there's a new Stanley Kubrick movie coming out, somehow he wasn't dead, he faked it, I would be like, oh, that's going to be a great movie before I even see it. Right. So Louis Milestone, now I've seen 3 of his movies, all from the Golden Boys, and anyone following along has. And I think he's a good director. But I think when you watch a director a lot, they tell you about themselves. And one of the things I think he tells about him is that he does not have high regard for women. I think women are an object to be earned, not to be earned, an object to acquire. They're not an intellectual part of any main conversation. All Quiet on the Western Front has one scene with women in it. And granted, that's a book, Men at War, but he picked this movie. He picked a movie about men at war. And the one scene with women that he shows them in, they're basically prostitutes sleeping with the soldiers. This movie, there are barely any women in it. They're treated very poorly by the men in the room. Even the guy's wife who wants him to go on this wedding, she's just so dismissive to her when she comes in. I'm doing the case. We're not leaving. And the other movie that this fella did, I believe was The Racket from the first Academy Awards. And in that movie, a character says, like, you can't trust women. Like, women will bring about your ruin. So I feel like, all right, we got 3 movies where, women aren't given main parts. They're not featured. And when they are, it's either as they get in the way or they're just some bird to have on your arm, like some status symbol thing or something. Like something, a prize. So I don't like that. So I don't like that about this director. I don't like the macho kind of vibe that he seems to gravitate towards.
Yeah, Molly Malloy was the one sort of character who's I guess is Earl Williams' lover, or
I think she was a prostitute, but Earl Williams had stayed with her. They didn't have sex, but he was good to her.
He was good to her, right? So they had a sort of affinity and a bond of outcasts or whatever, and she was the one kind of spicy character, but of course she just gets roughed up the most and then eventually winds up just jumping out of a window, which was absurd. There was an interesting, wasn't there a scene where, and I don't know if it had to do with her, there was a scene where all the men are around the table and they're just wisecracking their usual reporter making their, crass jokes. And then they got some terrible bit of news. Maybe it was the mother of Earl Williams or something. I don't remember what it was, but everything got really quiet and the mood changed. And that was kind of an interesting scene where there was one of the few scenes where there was like reverence, where these guys kind of all stopped cracking jokes because it wasn't funny anymore. And I think, weren't they all standing kind of keeping watch outside the hospital because Molly Malloy wasn't really dead? Wasn't that it? Like I remember.
Yeah, but you also the cynic is like they're waiting for the story. If she dies,
right, that's true too, right? Maybe that's why they're there. Yeah. No, you're right. Women definitely don't have a very high status. They're basically kind of an annoyance or or a plot device.
So that's all I really got on the front page. Ready to
let's move on.
Let's get to all right. Skippy. All right, April 5th, 1931. Yes, finally we're talking about this movie. I know people at home and podcasters, they're like, when will someone please talk about Skippy? Right now, turns out. Came out April 5th, 1931, directed by Norman Torg. Availability. Lance, I believe I was about to ask you, how did we watch this movie?
Wasn't it like some weird Russian bootleg website that you could watch it for free? So yeah, that might be the only place on earth where it can be found. I thought I saw a Turner Classic logo in the corner, so maybe somebody recorded it and then uploaded it when it appeared. So it must be in some archive somewhere, a print, obviously, but that was the only place I could find it.
Yeah, me too. We both watched it on the super sketchy Well, I only say sketchy because it was all in Russian and I can't read any of it. So it could have been saying like, we're stealing your information, you idiot American.
Right. Not recommended.
Yeah.
Not recommended, especially not for this movie. But
there is a site called, I think it's dvdlady.com, where you can spend $12 and they print bootleg copies and mail them to you. I hate advertising things like that, but some of these movies, we want to watch them at least. It was 85 minutes long. Jackie Cooper stars as Skippy Skinner, and Robert Coogan plays his friend Suki Wayne, who I thought was a little girl the whole movie until I read that the actor's name was Robert Coogan. This film did well enough to inspire a sequel, which me and Lance did not watch, called Suki. This movie was nominated 4 times. 1 for actor, Jackie Cooper. Definitely at the time, the youngest actor ever nominated for Best Actor. And I think up until very recently, there might be one person who's younger. It was nominated for writing, adaptation, and it was nominated for Best Picture and directing, Norman Taurog. And Norman Taurog won. He was the youngest director to win.
Youngest director, right, yeah.
Until Damien Chazelle won for La La Land. We can discuss why we think that happened as soon as I tell you what the movie was about. Skippy, a 1931 American pre-code comedy film about the scrappy boy portrayed in the popular comic strip and novel Skippy by Percy Crosby. Film stars Jackie Cooper in the title role. Skippy is the rambunctious son of well-to-do Dr. Herbert Skinner. Dr. Skinner forbids Skippy from visiting Shantytown on the other side of the train tracks because it is unhygienic, dirty, and full of poor people. Skippy goes anyway and befriends Sookie, defending him in a fistfight with town bully Harley Nubbins. Harley is the physically abused son of the local dog catcher. After accidentally breaking his father's windshield with a yo-yo, Harley blames Skippy and Sookie, leading Mr. Nubbins to capture Sookie's dog at the pound. Skippy breaks his piggy bank to pay for the dog, but Mr. Nubbins tells him that the money is for the windshield and they need $3 more for the dog or it will be put down. Skippy and Sookie try many means to obtain the money, from a lemonade stand to staging a performance, but it comes too late as Mr. Nubbins has had the dog killed. Skippy's father overhears Skippy's tearful laments and fixes everything by buying Sookie a new dog, saving Shantytown from demolition, buying a bike for Skippy, and punching Mr. Nubbins in the face. The end.
You managed to get through that without cracking up. Proud of you.
Academy Award nominated Best Picture. Skip. Lance.
Oh boy. Wow. What a dumpster fire this movie was. Sorry, I know we're supposed to be kind, but
wait, is this your worst? Is this your worst one?
No, this is not my worst one. No.
People, stay tuned.
The dumpster fire gets even greater, even more of a conflagration. But yeah, no. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it was definitely trying for Little Rascals vibes, but without any of the humor or charm or fun of it. So.
Kenny in the editor's booth here. For those of you, like me, suddenly pondering the Little Rascals timeline. Little Rascals, or Our Gang, shorts, ran from 1922 to 1944. Young Jackie Cooper, Skippy, signed a 3-year contract to be a rascal, soon becoming one of the main characters. His most famous episode, School's Out, detailed his crush on schoolteacher Miss Crabtree. Cooper was loaned to Paramount during his contract to star as Skippy. Okay, back to the show.
It was just annoying. I just found this whole movie super annoying. I'm trying to think of something that would be redeeming about it. It did actually tug at my heartstrings when poor Penny died.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see more justice for Penny and not just a new dog. I wanted to see vengeance. The dog catcher got punched in the face by Mr. Skinner, but it seems there should have been more justice for Penny. So I'm going to continue my lonely crusade for justice for Penny.
Justice for Penny. You couldn't even bury the body. You wouldn't even give up the body of the dog.
He was a real bad man. I mean, and that was kind of funny. It's like, what worse villain could there be in a child's world than a dog catcher? I mean, in a dog catcher, who kills dogs? No, decent person would do that. So I don't know what else to say. I didn't really enjoy this movie. I didn't enjoy the acting or the characters or the script or anything about it, really.
But he was nominated Best Actor, Lance. He didn't enjoy
Well, compared to Sookie, like maybe if you paired the two of them together and those were the only 2 child actors you had ever seen in your life, then yeah, he's definitely the winner. But
I think he got nominated just for that scene where the dog died and he cries, which is also what I read in this Oscar book. the director made him cry by threatening to kill his dog if he didn't do the scene right. And then Jackie Cooper, those were real tears during that scene. And it's funny, people are like, oh, there's a kid crying on screen. Academy Award, Best Actor, right there.
There it is.
Adult actor during that time. One of the Barrymores wins Best Actor. You're this stage legend. You know, you're maybe it's John Barrymore, and you're the stage legend, and you just did this movie, and you're nominated for an Academy Award, and you're like, all right, who am I up against? And they're like, well, you're up against a 6-year-old from a movie named Skippy. Like, what am I doing with my life?
Well, who's the only reason he's crying is because the director threatened to kill his dog. Life was harsh back then. Things were definitely harsher. I can definitely pick up that vibe from watching these movies. It was a rougher world back then, for animals and children and pretty much everybody, and women and minorities.
Justice for Harley Nubbins. This kid is portrayed as the bully of the film. He's like the jerk wearing the Jughead hat who's always picking on the kids. This kid is being beaten by his father constantly. He is just, what is his home life like? This poor kid, he's just going out. He can't help but how he is, There's no one there to help protect that poor boy. Who do you think, after this movie, roll credits, and his dad just got punched out by Skippy's dad, what do you think happens next? I'll tell you. He gets up off the ground, he drags his son in the house, and he beats the crap out of him. That's exactly what happens next. It's terrible.
It is a tragedy, just imagining the lives off screen. Definitely.
Yeah, the lives by this. It's such a weird picture too, like that the dad just suddenly, at the end is like, let me go save the day with my money and just come down and, we're not going to tear this town down. Oh, you want a dog? How about you get a dog? You get a dog. Let me get your mom a job. And
it was absurd. The whole thing was absurd, and whatever charm it may have charmed for the audiences in those days, it definitely was lost on me. I didn't get it.
Did you like anything about it? Is there something you could pinpoint to and be like, I like this about this movie?
I thought Penny's performance was really outstanding.
Oh yeah, you keep harping on Penny. Really?
That's about it.
If Sam were here, he would have hated that. He doesn't like dogs in movies, if you recall.
And he probably would have liked this movie too, just to spite us.
Yeah, please don't be afraid to leave comments on our videos if you actually enjoy these movies, because I really do like hearing people who have a take that's completely opposite what we're talking about. If someone out there, if this movie challenged them and they felt like, you know what, Skippy, it's one of my top 5, I want to hear from you. I really do. I'm curious. It was based on the American comic strip, which makes me wonder, could we call this the first comic book movie? Is this the MCU in brewing
from inauspicious beginnings?
Inauspicious beginnings. Apparently Charles Schultz was a fan of this, and Peanuts grew out of that, which you can totally see. I think, just the gang of friends. Like, I feel like there was a dirty friend. I feel like the Peanuts characters were hanging out with Skippy in there.
Yeah, I feel like this comic was probably a lot more charming than the movie.
And we should mention the Peanut Butter stole the name Skippy from this movie. There was a big lawsuit afterwards in which they were allowed to keep using it, but they just literally saw this. They saw this movie and were like, we're naming our peanut butter that, because the other name, Rat Filth, wasn't going over well. So I don't know what it was. Skippy. Yep. So I don't really have much else to say on this movie. The only thing I will say that I did like about this movie is, as a kid, as me growing up, and we're from a little bit of a different time from kids now, the idea of wandering into a place like Shantytown, that's totally something I would have done as a child. I would have crossed the tracks, gone to that dangerous area my parents told me not to go to. Of course, I probably would have been from Shantytown in the real world. I thought that was interesting. I thought, like, them crossing the tracks and kind of this rough and tumble world, I just feel like they didn't do anything.
Yeah, the world of unsupervised play is kind of no more, right? That wasn't what felt alien to me, but I can see how somebody else could watch that and be like, where are these kids' parents?
Yeah. 100%.
But that's definitely how I grew up, definitely. Yeah. I was pretty much left the house in the morning and didn't come back until the sun started to go down, and had dinner with my parents, but the rest of the day I was on my own. So yeah, that part was, I guess, believable to me. I didn't know what was up with Skippy's outfit either. I didn't quite get that, the whole jacket, tie, weird shorts thing. What was going on with that? I mean, I see the comic book character. It seems to translate better in comics than it does in real life.
Yeah. I feel like they just made it for the comic to give him like an iconic kind of look. But when you translate that to a real kid, you're like, no kids dress
absurd. Like right. Not even in those days.
Maybe a kid from Shantytown with no clothes, but Skippy's like from a rich family, so you would think his parents would have clothes that fit him.
His mom has eccentric tastes. She dresses him. Clearly, she's repressed. She dresses him the way that she would like to, project herself into the world, but can't. So I'm going to analyze the psychology of this. He's like a surrogate for her, the freedom that she wishes she had.
He kept cutting down the dad too. The dad would try to be like the stern dad of like, now Skippy. And then mom would be like, your dinner's getting cold, honey. Right. How about just let him do some parenting? Because you're not doing parenting. This kid, his hair is messed up. He's not listening to his mother at all. He doesn't listen till the dad yells. They're parenting, these two. They got to work on it.
There's a lot of dysfunction in that family. The subtitle of this movie should be Skippy, Portrait of a Dysfunctional Family.
Yeah, Skippy. Where are the helicopter parents? We need them. Save these kids.
All right. Well, that was probably the most enjoyable review we've done so far.
Yeah, I would say. Here is a movie. It's definitely a movie because it's written down on this paper here. Trader Horn came out May 23rd, 1931. W.S. Van Dyke is the name that wanted to take credit for this. It was available on, I only found one channel on YouTube that had this. And I think that's probably the one you watched it on, right?
Yes.
122 minutes, stars Edwina Booth as Nina Trent, the White Goddess. Harry Carey as Aloysius Trader Horn. The movie is named after him. Actor Duncan Ronaldo as Peru, his partner. And I'm going to try and say this correctly. I really want to. Mutia or Molu as Rancharo. This movie was nominated, won Academy Award for Best Picture. Before I get into the synopsis, we have two movies left, this and City Lights. I'm not going to leave people in suspense. I hated this movie. There is not, except for this movie Chang, which I'll talk about a little bit later, from the first Academy Awards. This is right up there, the worst. This is my pick for worst movie this year. Do you want to leave people in suspense, whether it's this or City Lights, or do you want to?
Yeah, Kenny, I mean, the less said about this movie, the better. You and I are, of course, very much proponents of, finding and preserving these movies, even if some of them are of dubious artistic nature. They're artifacts of the time. This is a movie that's almost best left forgotten.
I agree.
There are some interesting elements. I don't know. Do you want to give the synopsis before I go off on?
Let's jump to the synopsis. Trader Horn is a 1931 American pre-code adventure film directed by W.S. Van Dyke. It's the first non-documentary film that was shot on location in Africa. The film is based on the book of the same name by trader and adventurer Alfred Aloysius Horn, and tells of his adventures on safari in Africa. The film depicts the adventures of real-life trader and adventurer Alfred Aloysius Trader Horn while on safari in Africa. Much of the film is fictional, including the discovery of a white blonde jungle queen, the lost daughter of a missionary. A scene based upon a genuine incident occurs in which Carey as Horn swings on a vine across a river filled with genuine crocodiles, one of which comes very close to taking his leg off. Many accidents and delays occurred during filming in Africa. Many of the crew, including the director W.S. Van Dyke, contracted malaria. An African crewman fell into a river and was eaten by a crocodile, while another was killed by a charging rhinoceros. The rhinoceros was captured on film, and the scene was used in the final print. Swarms of many insects, including locusts and tsetse flies, were common. How do you pronounce that?
I think it's tsetse flies.
Tsetse?
Tsetse.
Were common, and cast and crew were perpetually bitten or stung. Female lead Edwina Booth became infected, probably with malaria or schistosomiasis, during filming. It took 6 years for her to fully recover from this and other conditions she endured. She retired from acting soon after and sued Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The case was settled out of court. A sound crew sent halfway through filming were unable to produce good quality work. This resulted in most of the dialogue sequences being reshot in Culver City, California. This caused rumors that the entire production had been filmed there, so most of the footage was cut from the final release. Many animal scenes were filmed in Mexico by a second unit to avoid the American laws on the ethical treatment of animals. For example, lions were reportedly starved to promote vicious attacks on hyenas, monkeys, and a deer. I think it's funny that midway through the synopsis of the movie, it just turns into what a hellhole.
Well, that's probably the most interesting part of the movie, but yeah, continue.
These movies that are hard to find, Wikipedia doesn't really like to tell you the whole story about it, probably because not many people have seen it, and that's a good thing. But so we got Trader Horn. He's got his young friend Peru, who looks like I think he's just there to kill something. He's like, let me show you Africa. He's got his giant stupid helmet.
It's a giant. He's wearing a giant pith helmet that looks like Dark Helmet from Spaceballs.
Yes.
Right. So it's absurd.
And he wears it the whole movie. He never takes that thing off.
No, it's even ripped. It's even like bitten in half or something by a crocodile. It's just,
So these two are traveling through the jungle. They encounter this female explorer or something. I didn't write it out.
She's a missionary.
A missionary.
Right. So she's a missionary. Trader Horn is trading.
Yes.
For his name. And of course, let's talk for whatever he can trade, apparently. And, like he's talking early on about how he's kind of pulling one over on the natives. I got 6 cheetah skins for this salt. So, I don't know, aside from the racism, sexism, and animal cruelty, maybe there's an interesting movie in there somewhere, but it's just so racist. Let's just say that, like, just blatantly. So again, it's one of those contradictions that I guess is similar to what we saw in Cimarron, where the most sympathetic character, actually, in this one, who's actually played, it's
Rencharo,
which is a really strange name, but Rencharo was probably the most dignified character, probably the most useful character in the movie. Yeah. And he dies tragically in service of his white savior. So again, we have another one of the kind of white savior tropes happening, but at least he's treated with dignity. Now, granted, he's also the one wielding the whip against his fellow Africans. It's just disturbing. And there's like just this disturbing level. And then of course Nina, who's the daughter of the missionary. That's getting back to what we're talking about. The missionary is kind of spreading the word of God but to the natives, but also looking for her lost daughter. She lost her husband. They were raided and killed by hostile tribe of natives, whatever. Apparently the daughter was still alive. The remains of the husband were found, but the daughter has never been found. So she's constantly looking for her daughter because there are rumors that she is a member of the tribe now. Of course, we find out that, she's the queen now. But of course, she would have to be.
Right.
Right. It's really offensive. There are some, it definitely looks like they filmed. There weren't, it didn't seem like a costume set, right? These were actual tribes they went in.
For sure.
They were actual tribes, actual locations. And that was pretty fascinating to look at, and I can imagine an American audience in the 1930s was probably like, ooh, but they of course play to the worst stereotypes about it. They don't try to explain, or they just sort of exploit the alienness of it. And of course they're cannibals and they're savages and all the worst kind of racist tropes of the period. Yeah. And then some pretty wild scenes of of animals in the safari.
That was nuts. That was absurd. 20 minutes of the movie of just them walking through being like, oh, there's a giraffe over there.
Right. Look, an elephant. That rhino's chasing us. And there's just like this insane bounty of animals like everywhere all around them. So it's kind of calm. But again, to an audience in 1931 who had probably never seen or had rarely seen anything like this on footage, this must have been really wild stuff. It must have been really, really exotic and intense. And when he's swinging over the crocodile river, it is very clearly filled with crocodiles, and he very clearly almost gets chomped by one. Like, again, things were rough back then. The director was like, "All right, look, you're gonna swing over this river full of crocodiles. You wouldn't do that now."
No. Do you believe that really happened to this real Trader Horn guy, that he swung over a lake of crocodiles on a vine?
Well,
I don't buy it. I think it's all made up BS.
But the fact that they made the actors do that
Yeah.
was insane. So, I mean, just for pure insanity, I mean, this movie is hard to beat. I think you would have to. I, and
I gave the movie the middle finger. I literally stood up and gave it the middle finger
right,
when they
right.
shot the rhinoceros. Like when we watched
Yeah.
them murder a rhinoceros on
Well,
screen.
and they shot that rhinoceros, and that was what I read and what you were just reading. I think the rhinoceros that they shot was one that had actually killed one of the crewmen.
Oh, so it deserved it.
Well, whatever you want to say. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think it deserved anything,
No,
but the fact that they just said, well, just go ahead and use the footage of the rhino that killed our crewman. You know, like we'll just use that. It was definitely of a different time.
one thing I would say to the people out there, though, that are of the type to be like, well, those were different times, and they didn't have the modern sensibilities that we have. Well, let me point you to no other Academy Awards than this Academy Awards, the fourth Academy Awards that we're doing now, where Taboo, A Story of the South Seas, which Murnau, a German director, went to the Pacific, found this tribe and filmed this movie, and it's completely there's no white characters there. The main characters are people from that tribe. Like half of the movie is kind of just what their ceremonies and life is like, and the second half turns into this kind of love story where the lead, the girl of the movie, is chosen by like one of the elders to be her wife, and now no other guy can look at her, and her boyfriend doesn't like this, and they try to run away. That movie is fantastic, and it deals with another culture that Americans wouldn't have been familiar with, and it doesn't use any of those crappy tropes that this movie uses. This movie was made by racist people. It's just this, but I think people with a heart would have not wanted to kill animals, would have not treated like these tribes people this way. They're presented like it's this shocking trip to Africa. I think to me, it's interesting seeing all these tribal people. In the back of my head, I'm so mad because I'm like, they probably didn't get paid for this. They probably weren't fully aware that like their image would be captured for hundreds and thousands of years and watched by us this many years later. Like they probably didn't grasp that, because I doubt the director sitting down and being like, this is what you're signing on for when we bring these cameras in here. And they were probably just like Trader Horn. They were probably given like three pelts and told, oh, that's all we need. Now just spend a week filming this with us. Just makes me mad.
It's a very exploitative film. It's definitely exploiting the sense of the otherness. There's no attempt to try to be to try to understand. It's purely played up for its alienness and its danger and its threat. And of course they throw in cannibalism,
Yeah.
to add to this, like at one point where at the beginning of the movie in the credits, there was a thanks to all the white hunters of the African veldt and jungle. No thanks to the people who they were actually filming. Peru, who's another offensive character to me.
Yes.
He says, what did he say? When he's first introduced to the tribes people and they're trading with the first tribe, he says, they're not savages. They're just happy, ignorant children.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, they cut to a skeleton hanging there and he goes, happy, ignorant children, huh? Yeah, they're savages. And he has so many things, like every black devil will be out of their mind when the juju magic is spreading. His great affection that he has for Ranchero, which again is a strange contradiction. But again, Ranchero is there in the service of, bettering his race to be, at the level of white people. And he sacrifices his life for a white person. So totally racist. Yeah, just kind of trash. And Nina as the white princess, who they save from the savages.
I mean, I obviously feel bad for the actress for what she went through, but that character was just like absolutely nothing. And you know what bothered me too, Lance, is that this movie, in the exploitative vein, has no problem showing these. And this is, when you're a kid and you see nudity in National Geographic and people are like, well, it doesn't really count as nudity because you're seeing tribeswomen's breasts, Okay, maybe that's true if I'm from that culture, but I'm from a culture that sexualizes breasts. And this movie shows all these tribeswomen's breasts. And when it comes to the white girl who's raised by the tribe, I'm sorry, but they cover her up the whole time.
Yeah,
You're
right.
telling on yourselves.
Right.
You're telling on your racist selves.
Right. I mean, she was wearing sort of beads to kind of
Yeah.
obscure it, but we never got full breast exposure from her.
Which honestly, and this isn't me saying that in like trying to be a lech. This is me like, okay, you put her in this tribe. All the other women that are around, you're constantly showing them with doing chores and doing things with their breasts out. And now you have a white girl here and she's covered up. Okay, this is what you think about these people.
And again, also, like the cruelty and on display with the animals was disturbing, especially knowing the backstory. Yeah, this movie
They
should
went
never
to
have.
Mexico to avoid our laws on harming animals.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's really like just a travesty.
That's what I wanted to mention earlier was this movie Chang at the first Academy Awards was basically just killing animals on. It was showing these indigenous people and they were just constantly killing animals throughout and manhandling animals. And I hated that movie at the time. I was like, this movie, every animal in the movie was hurt. I don't recommend anyone watch this. This movie is there's like this weird lineage of these safari directors who want to show you other lands. Like it's because it's tied up in the age of like, I guess you got film as a new medium, but so is kind of exploring, like, you still think of the world as there's lots of vast, unknown, mysterious places where there might be hidden civilizations and stuff. We don't really have that now. They don't really make movies like that now because we've explored the whole planet for the most part. But so you get movies like Chang and they follow this lineage. It leads to King Kong. I do think King Kong was a good movie. So it's weird that there's this lineage to get there of just showcasing sensational.
Yeah, it was highly sensational, highly exploitative. It was kind of the worst impulses of Hollywood, really.
Yeah.
It's the worst of Hollywood right here.
Yes. Can you imagine if this had won Best Picture? Like what that would say about us as a creature on Earth.
It got nominated says plenty. I mean, come on.
And yeah, that's bad enough, but could have been worse. All right, let's share this screen. We got to move on to something. Let's do a palate cleanser here, for God's sakes. City Lights. People at home, you're like, what is going on, Golden Boy? You guys are breaking them rules over there. Why are we talking about this movie? It didn't get nominated for nothing. And that's a fact. City Lights came out on January 30th, 1931, directed by Charlie Chaplin. How did you watch this movie, Lance?
I watched it on HBO Max, actually. This is another HBO Max, for anybody who doesn't know, seems to have this incredible abundance of classic movies. So
they've gotten they've really upped their movie catalog.
Maybe we should. I think it's just Max now. I'm sorry. I have a hard time with that branding, but so yeah. Max for you youngsters, but yeah, they have a really impressive array of classic films on Max, and this was one, along with The Front Page was also on Max.
So City Lights, I saw it on Criterion, which I should shout out. Criterion Channel has a lot of Charlie Chaplin's movies. I've not bought this one. This was just on the channel. They also have a commentary, which I wanted to watch, but I didn't really have time before this, and lots of other behind the scenes stuff, but I didn't have time for any of that. Directed by Charlie Chaplin. The length of the movie, 87 minutes, stars Virginia Cherrill, Cherrill, Cheryl, as the blind girl, and Charlie Chaplin as the tramp. City Lights is a 1931 American silent romantic comedy drama written, produced, directed, and starring Charlie Chaplin. Story follows the misadventures of Chaplin's tramp character as he falls in love with a blind girl and develops a turbulent friendship with an alcoholic millionaire. Although sound films were on the rise when Chaplin started developing the script in 1928, he decided to continue working with silent productions. Filming started in December 1928, ended September 1930. He composed the film score for this, which is also notable. A silent film made purposely in the sound era, Chaplin's tramp character, star of 60-ish shorts and features, makes his second-to-last appearance here, modern times being the character's final appearance. Wandering the big city, the tramp is mistaken for a rich man by a blind flower girl, and he becomes smitten. Later that night, he encounters an actual millionaire, drunk and about to commit suicide. The tramp stops him, and they become best friends, but only when the rich man is drunk. When he's sober, he has the tramp thrown out. The flower girl becomes sick. Posing as a rich man, the tramp promises to help her pay her rent and get experimental surgery to restore her sight. With the millionaire out of town, the tramp works various jobs, including shoveling horse crap and signing up for a boxing match, which he loses. The return of his drunk friend the millionaire is the only thing that helps, and he loans him $1,000. Unfortunately, a miscommunication and a sober millionaire leads to the tramp going to jail for stealing the money, though he is able to give the blind girl the money first. In the end, released from jail, more broken down than at the start of the film, he encounters the blind girl once more. She is now able to see and has opened a flower shop. She does not recognize the tramp. Now, this last bit here is from Wikipedia. The girl steps to the shop door and offers a flower to the tramp. He looks much more devastated than he did earlier in the movie, which he shyly accepts. She takes his hand and presses the coin into it, then abruptly stops, and her smile turns to a look of puzzlement as she recognizes the touch of his hand. She runs her finger along his arm, his shoulders, lapel, and gasps, "You?" The tramp nods and asks, "You can see now?" The girl replies, "Yes, I can see now," and presses his hand to her heart with a tearful smile. Tramp smiles back. The end. What do you think of this movie, Lance?
I thought it was so lovely. I just adored this movie. It was far and away the best one. I feel like I in my opinion.
Don't spoil it. Come on. Yeah. We haven't done Golden Boys yet.
Well, it wasn't nominated, right?
So. That's true. Can we vote for a movie that was not nominated for a Golden Boy?
Let's just move on and we'll see what happens, Kenny. But yeah, no, I loved this movie. And it's the only one that I would, I guess, call a classic, because the other ones are I guess, interesting artifacts of the period, but not really movies that I would say stand the test of time, that hold up, that I think a modern audience, they're not something that a modern audience would resonate with, I think, for the most part. Mm-hmm. But this movie just kind of continues to resonate, at least with me, and apparently with a lot of other people. I don't know, it's just lovely. It's very funny. It's so well done. It's just on all up and down the craftsmanship. This is Chaplin, obviously, peak silent era, and he's, like when we watched, for example, the Hitchcock movie. I'm blanking on what was the name of the one that was filmed both silent and with sound. Blackmail, right? So when we watched Blackmail, there was a huge dimension that was added with sound. Would you agree? It totally improved the movie.
Different movies, really.
Yeah, but this movie doesn't need sound at all. There's nothing that could be improved on. He just had mastered. I feel like it had just mastered the silent film genre. I don't know. It's just so lovely on so many different levels. The lead actor who played the blind girl was charming. The millionaire, he's great. Yeah, there's good, solid performances throughout, and Chaplin is just exquisite. It was just great acting, and so humorous but heartfelt. And I don't know. Sorry, I'll stop gushing, but I love this movie, obviously. Yeah. One
of the people who watched the show on Golden Boy, Renee Ruiz. Did I say that right? I hope I said that right, Renee. He mentioned that, we didn't do The Circus justice, Chaplin's movie, The Circus, at the first Academy Awards. And I want to make up for that now, because I loved The Circus, and I was so hot when we were filming that episode. It was like midway through. That episode ran way too long. And it was like the middle of summer. I was wearing a suit and I was dying. And when The Circus came up, I knew I was tanking it. I'm like, I am not selling this movie, because I loved it. And I kind of was a little down on City Lights. I had seen City Lights before. And to me, it felt like, I think my criticism of it was that it felt like a couple of gags tied together, like short Charlie Chaplin movies. Like, okay, here's the boxing Charlie Chaplin movie. A lot of Chaplin's early shorts, they're not that great. It's usually just like, okay, we're in the location, usually the park, and here's a bunch of antics, in that location. So like, I think in my brain, I was watching a lot of Chaplin. I was like, oh, this is just like they did a boxing thing, and they did a poop cleaner thing, and they did he's hanging out with a millionaire thing. And rewatching it now, like, I don't know what was wrong with me. I was way wrong. This movie is fantastic, and it ties so well together, the thread of helping out this blind girl. And I actually teared up. I almost teared up actually reading that last paragraph from Wikipedia. I think it was so well done. That shot where he first meets her and realizes she's blind. I read somewhere that's up until maybe Stanley Kubrick, and maybe even afterwards, that was filmed the most times. They did like hundreds of takes on that because he was trying to convey the information of how is she mistaking him for a rich person? How is he figuring out that she's blind? Like, there's a lot that has to happen. And when you watch that scene, it's so easy. It's just kind of, okay, and there's a lot of craft that went into making this movie work that you don't see, because it's so, everything kind of smoothly transitions to the next thing. And I think you're right. This is a guy, that intro of him laying in the statue being unveiled in the city, in the sound era, so we're in the sound era movies. He has those people giving speeches and they're just like muffled joke, stupid voices like, oh yeah, we could do talking, but what, we're not going to bore you with that. And then we pull the sheet up and here he is doing a bunch of great physical gags that I thought were all very funny. I don't really have a negative thing to say about this movie, I don't think. Could you come up with something?
I mean, I'm sure I could if I wanted to parse it, but yeah, it's just very charming. It just is beguiling. I don't know. It almost kind of disarms me where I just can't even, I don't even want to criticize anything about it. It's just a very charming and funny movie, and the ending is spectacularly beautiful. I don't know, I just loved it, and I'm a sucker for these kinds of movies, I will admit, but for a romantic movie, but it was, yeah, head and shoulders above everything else we watched, and yeah, certainly far more deserving. And I guess it was wildly popular when it came out too, and that popularity has sustained it through the years. So like, who cares if it didn't win an Oscar? Yeah. It's head and shoulders above the Oscars.
I mean, what would you say your personal, if you had to, what would your feeling be on why this movie didn't get nominated for Best Picture in the year with the 5 movies we previously talked about? Like, what do you think?
I mean, your conspiracy theory certainly sounds plausible to me. I mean, I can't think of any reason, because it's just so vastly better that I think it's just like, if you were to say that the Oscars are not really any sort of award for merit, artistic merit, but a politicking and behind the scenes glad handing and money exchanging hands, that certainly would explain this, because the movie that was the artistically superior film did not even get any nominations. So yeah, I think that they intentionally blocked it out. Yes, they wanted to make sure they were all sound films to kind of keep moving forward with sound, but I'm sure there was other politicking and reasons. These studio heads, it all seems like money was involved, and not the whatever artistic criteria it was being based on. Well, there wasn't any. It was maybe superficially.
They're trying to sell us their talky, killing animals, bombastic movies, and they don't have room for these little artistic,
Chances did, because I think it outsold pretty much every other movie this year. I don't know. I'd have to look. I would say it did better than any of the other nominees.
Kenny from the editing booth again, just to back up Lance's statement with a couple of facts. The number 8 movie of 1931 was Cimarron, bringing in $1,122,000. The number 2 movie of 1931 was Traderhorn, bringing in $1,642,000. I'm wagging my finger at you, America, 1931. But the number 1 movie in 1931, making $2 million, was indeed City Lights. Back to you, Lance.
People in the comments can correct me.
Yeah, I found a review of City Lights from 1931, because this is from a month after the movie came out. Cimarron, to put this in people's brains, Cimarron's coming out as this review is coming out. and it's by Sid Silverman from Variety. Chaplin has another good picture. The 3-year period since the circus and sound will give City Lights a percentage of novelty money, and that it contains no dialogue. And it's Chaplin, which has come to mean a hysterical press. These factors ought to total heavy box office receipts, but the film isn't so strong that there isn't some doubt concerning its holdover power. He kind of goes on, he has a couple of little tidbit problems with the movie, things he likes about the movie, but I think what's interesting is right near the end. Talkers have not affected Chaplin, and neither will he affect talkers. There will always be room for a Chaplin. He doesn't make bad pictures because he has the talent, time, and means as a safeguard. There was no one like him before in pictures, and since sound came, that's doubly true. The only thing sound can do to a silent Chaplin is perhaps make him slightly less important in the general public eye as time goes on. I think what's interesting to me is there's one more Tramp movie after this. This is the end of Chaplin, like no matter how you look at it. Like, so this reviewer is probably being a little optimistic at the time, thinking they're just going to keep letting him, or he's going to keep being able to make movies in the sound era. But I think Modern Times is next, and that's the last Tramp movie. Yeah, I think there was a concerted effort to end that. Sound was old time. Sound was your parents' movies. Silent was your parents' movies, and sound is the future. And the writing was probably on the wall at that point. And it's sad because all of the inventiveness we've seen doing the Hitchcock silence, when you have this, you can't use this one. We're taking this element away. You can't use sound. You have to be so creative and inventive. And this movie is like the peak of that. And then all these other movies we watched are not inventive. I mean, Front Page had a few inventive things in it, but as a whole, it's not a good movie. And it's not like a movie I would say, like, it's not like going to be a Citizen Kane type of a movie. So I think it is sad watching basically an art form kind of end, in favor of another one. That's all I got to say on this movie. Do you got any final notes on City Lights before we bring this Golden Boy to its conclusion?
No, I think you summed it up nicely there, Kenny. That's my feelings too. I think we both had strong, positive feelings.
Whoa, we're back. Your hosts. Okay, so without any further ado, so the way Golden Boy works is there are 5 movies nominated for Best Picture. So you have to pick one of those. The ideas, this is obviously monkey wrenches have been thrown into the show over and over again since we started. Last episode, I think Gavin picked like 4 out of 5 movies as Best Picture. Lance, I threw City Lights in at the last minute, and there's probably might be some people that say we shouldn't count it, and maybe we shouldn't count it. So whatever I have written down in here and what you have written down in there, can you just confirm before we do this that we have not talked about our picks with each other?
I can confirm in the positive.
Okay.
Yes, that we have not talked to each other about beforehand about what our picks were.
All I know is Trader Horn's not going to be written on that paper. All right. All right, ready? We're going to do these at the same time.
Oh, we are? Okay. All right.
And then afterwards, I'll ask you a few more questions.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Golden Boy, the 4th Academy Awards. And the Best Picture goes to City Lights. And the 4th Golden Boy for Best Picture goes to a write-in candidate by unanimous decision. City Lights by Charlie Chaplin. Suck it, Louis B. Your Academy is still crooked.
No, mine's
We did it, man. We changed history right here on this show.
That's right. We rectified a historical wrong that happened here.
We did.
Proud of that. Proud of us, Kenny.
I think in my brain, once we added that movie in, I'm like, this show isn't about this show's about what's the best picture, right? But there's nothing saying we have to follow their rules. These guys had bad rules. They let a movie like Trader Horn get nominated. We're changing history. I'm so happy that we agreed on the same movie here.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, when you threw that one in the mix, it's just so clearly better than any of those other ones. That it's kind of the obvious choice. I mean,
And this is from the guy.
And if I'm offending any Trader
Joe's customers,
Trader Horn. If I'm offending any Trader Horn, fans out there, then I don't feel bad because you're probably a bad person for liking that movie. So
I think I have to agree with you on that. If some guys, if you're a Trader Horn fan, you might need to just not follow us going forward. I hate saying that because we only have like 7 fans. I think we're up to 7 fans now. And I don't want to chase one of them away if they love Trader Horn, but this ain't for you, pal. City Lights, and I was going to say it's funny that this is just what sprung to my head was you saying you prefer the talkies over the silent films, and here you had an option between 5 talkies and 1 silent film, and look at how we've changed as people.
Well, I mean, in fairness, what we were watching were, and it's interesting I don't want to, keep talking forever about this, but we're watching these old Hitchcock films, and I really feel like Chaplin was way ahead of Hitchcock, at this point. Certainly artistically, he was at the top of his game, and Hitchcock is still evolving. So we're watching a much cruder, his silent films that we watched were fairly crude, and other silent films of the era maybe fairly crude, but this is a peak, maybe past peak, silent film, but by someone who has completely mastered the medium. So
yeah, everyone should run out. I think everyone should watch City Lights. Like it challenge yourself. If you don't like you think you don't like silent films, you don't like black and white movies, go watch this movie. This is a legend of cinema at the top of his game.
Yeah, I would recommend this movie to anybody. It's not there are certain movies I would only recommend to, my enemies or my, my fellow film nerds, but this movie is really for everyone. It is a true classic.
All right, Lance, for our fans at home who have made their lists based off of this, can you give us what was your list, your rankings of these 6 movies? If you want to start at City Lights and go down, what's the actual nominee?
So City Lights, by a country mile, as we've already discussed. Then I would definitely say probably Front Page.
I agree with you.
Then Cimarron, which had some interesting moments, but was still, had some very, like nauseating, stereotypes that we saw, and is kind of fell flat. But it was a very strange movie that was weirdly compelling to me. I don't know why. Yeah. But Skippy would probably be the next one, which I don't know. I would Skippy and East Lynn are just tied for equally bad, and then Trader Horn.
Yeah,
bringing up the far rear.
Our lists are almost exactly the same. I probably would give Skippy the spot above East Lynn just because East Lynn, I didn't know what I was watching the whole way. I'm like, what do I care about this movie? At least Skippy, okay, it's a kid trying to help a dog. Like, I think I wouldn't recommend any of those movies below City Lights. Like, this is just for the sake of for us ranking things. But it is funny that both you and I think Front Page was better than Cimarron, which was the movie that actually won. Shows we got good taste, man.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, I mean, it's a more interesting. I guess I could see why Cimarron maybe was chosen, because it is this grand sweeping classic Hollywood. It's kind of like the epic that Hollywood likes to kind of promote and make.
Yeah.
And maybe has this, message that they want to promote.
Yeah. Kind of like All Quiet on the Western Front. You're following that movie. You're like, we need another big, bombastic movie, and Cimarron definitely has that.
Right, Cimarron has that epic scope, whereas the Front Page is a pretty cynical movie, and it's a very dark movie. Even though it's a comedy, it's played as a comedy. There's some kind of dark elements to it, but I thought definitely the more interesting. In terms of cinematography and everything else, probably more interesting than Cimarron. But, yeah.
All right, Lance, this was really fun. I'm glad that you did this episode. It was kind of, I think if we hadn't added City Lights, this would have been like pulling teeth. I would have
been very bitter and sad, but I'm grateful. Thank you for having me on. It was really fun, and as torturous as some of these movies were to watch, it's very interesting to see this history that is kind of almost lost, and maybe in the case of Trader Horn it should be lost, but
Yeah.
it's still fascinating nonetheless. It's all very interesting, and to be able to watch City Lights again made it all worth it. So
I think in that context too of like, thinking about it, that this movie came out when these movies like that, how ballsy Chaplin is to put this movie out against silent movies. All Quiet on the Western Front just came out, and you're like, City Lights, we're putting this thing. I don't care about sound. I love it. I love that.
yeah, he's a real artist. He's a real artist, and he definitely earned my respect all over again. Not that is any great thing, but I mean, he's an artist that deserves to be respected and admired, I think.
Agreed.
Whatever his shortcomings may be in personal life or whatever.
Yeah, you got to separate that. But all right, I don't want to keep you past your bedtime. I think you go to what time is it down there in Virginia?
Same time as you. We're on the same coast, so
that I thought that might be how that worked. All right, Lantz. Thanks for doing the show, man.
East to west, not north to south.
Okay, let me write that down.
All right, man.
Great time, man.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks to Lantz, and we will see you all in a month for the 5th Academy Awards.
All right.
Hello, everyone. This is Kenny here in the editing booth about a few hours before we premiere this episode. I just want to remind everybody to please hit like and subscribe if you get a chance. It really helps the channel out. We are a niche channel, niche meaning we really are very small at the moment, and any help will boost the channel viewership wise. I'm going to be making episodes regardless because I booked about a year's worth of guests to be on the show, and I am looking forward to doing it, and I am having a lot of fun. Hopefully a few of you are as well. If you could leave your comments, I would love to hear your lists, your Oscar picks for the years we're talking about, and corrections and comments, anything like that. I love hearing that stuff, and I will try to reply to everybody in the comment sections, wherever comments might be found. But in the meantime, next month, on November 1st, we will be talking about the 5th Academy Awards. All right, here's your homework. Aerosmith by John Ford. Bad Girl by Frank Barzage. The Champ by King Vidor. 5-Star Final by Mervyn LeRoy. The Smiling Lieutenant by Ernst Lubitsch. Grand Hotel, which won, by Edmund Golding. 1 Hour with You, also by Ernst Lubitsch but with George Cukor. And Shanghai Express by Joseph von Sternberg. So we got a couple of directors we've all heard from before in previous episodes of Golden Boy, and a couple of new ones. It sounds like, fingers crossed, we might actually have a decent Academy Awards next time. Everyone, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.